Bianca.
Okay, everybody, welcome to this masterclass. This is Fearless February at Financy at the moment, and it's so incredibly topical right now because we've had the nurses go on strike. We've had a lot of focus on an economic review for women in New South Wales. That's just New South Wales. We had a major report also handed down in Victoria. So there's a lot of momentum going on, a lot of talk around pay and valuing your worth. So we started the month with Fiona Pearman looking at the gender pay gap basically and some little strategies there, which was fantastic. That's available on replay. If you want to become a Financy member, everything is in that growing library. The other wonderful person who I couldn't think of anyone else better than Fiona Pearman to talk about this subject. So Fiona is an expert when it comes to confidence. And this was something Maggie touched on immediately when talking about the gender pay gap, or just talking about valuing your worth from an employer perspective, or even in terms of pricing. Maggie talked about confidence, and immediately I thought, Fiona's been talking about this for so long, this is going to segue so nice. So the purpose of today's event, which Fiona will go into, is to really look at how we value our worth constantly. It's not just about getting that pay rise tomorrow. It's about building our financial growth and story, capability and net worth over time. So keeping that confidence going. So we'll delve into strategies around that today. As I said, if you want to, if you'd like to find out more information about Fiona, she does a lot of coaching for corporates around confidence, beyond just pay, looking at a lot of different aspects as well around leadership. So I'd urge you to check out her website and to get in touch separately. And if you are a Financy member, you get a discount for those services. So it's another benefit. And then let's get into it. I'll first start with an acknowledgement to country. Financy would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and its waters, and the offices in which Financy's business is located, the Bundjalung Nations. We pay our respects to traditional landowners, both past and present. So thank you everyone again for joining us. Fiona, it is over to you with this wonderful masterclass on valuing your worth, owning your worth, and boosting your net worth.
Absolutely, Bianca. And, as you said, I can't think of a better month to be having this conversation. It's certainly very live in the community. There's absolutely a zeitgeist, if you like, or a movement that says, we're really not going to go back to where we've been. And it really is a time to really dig in and understand what actually has to happen in order to own your worth. So it's one thing to say it as an idea, it's one thing to talk about it, but what needs to happen and what might that look like? Just in terms of how we'll play today, I'm very open. Bianca, I know you're always great at coming in with some stellar questions as we go through, so I'll rely on you to do some of that. If anyone else has questions as we go through, please feel free to pop those questions. Just unmute myself there. So just feel free to pop those questions into the chat feed. We're not a huge group today, so if you want to, you can come off mute. But if you are listening in, if you can pop yourself on mute at all other times, that would be awesome. So where I might go now, Bianca, is I might you can just let me screen share on the FP display. If you can just open up that ability to share.
Yep, all over to you.
Beautiful.
And just a reminder for anyone, stay on mute unless you have a question, or by all means put it in the chat and ask away as we go through this session. The main thing that we'd like to do with these Financy Masterclasses is encourage you to make use of the live format. That's one thing that is missing, I suppose, from the replay action in the membership area, is you miss out on that ability to ask the key questions that really matter to you and that next step or whatever it is you want to take. So please ask away.
Fantastic. So we're here to discuss, owning your worth. And I think, Bianca, when we were preparing for this and talking about this as a concept, what we've really found and the work we've done in coaching women, both in programs, in corporate environments, executives, is whatever we do in this space has a compounding effect. And that works in both ways. When we're taking action and we're doing things to own our worth, it's exponentially increasing. But when we're not and we're playing small, we're not necessarily taking those actions, it's actually having an effect the other way. And that's quite an important thing for people to recognise, that standing still is not standing still. It's actually, in this world, going backwards. So as we start off, we always like to just encourage people to really get clear on what it is that's important to them and why they're here. And if you're here and in the conversation today, I'm trusting that there's something important in this conversation for you, or if you're listening to the playback, always keen to hear, what's important to people, so that I can touch on, we've got literally reams of material and data and all sorts of great things we can share with you. And I'd really like to, as Bianca said, honour the people who are in the room and answer your questions specifically. So as you think about this and why you're here today, just, be conscious of what you might like to get out of the time together and what would be really valuable for you to walk away with. Just a little quick introduction to me and the business I represent. There's a picture of me in the middle there with my co-founder, Kate Bora. We've been working as culture and leadership advisors, coaches, facilitators for about 12, 15 years. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we've particularly focused on women in business and in corporate environments. And we've just seen the huge impact of resourcing those women to step up, to speak out more broadly and boldly, to really apply for and go for those senior level positions, to build that pipeline of female talent. And part of that is really owning their value, owning their worth, and talking to that and positioning that in a very commercial business case way. That's one of the big things we notice, is the more we can get commercial about this, the faster it tends to have an impact in terms of that salary negotiation piece. We wrote a book a few years ago called Core Confidence. That's where some of the work came from, and that's now in its second print. And we also run a program called Acts of Confidence that Bianca mentioned. That's a group coaching program. It has phenomenal results in terms of all of the things we're talking about today, but certainly articulating and sharing your value, building brand and profile, and negotiating for what you're worth. So just to give you a quick highlight of some of those things that we do in the program, all of these things feed into your capacity and your ability to own your worth. So, clarity is really important. Being able to articulate and share your contribution, your value, what you've made possible through your interactions, through the projects you've led, through the assignments you've completed. Being able to ask for what you want and ask for help are two really important ones. Not everything will go well in this negotiation phase or asking for what you're worth. So being prepared to have a few stumbles on the way, that fall down and get back up again. We also resource women to say no, because what we know about women in organisations is we're very good at picking up the extra work. In fact, Bianca, you and I talked about this last time. Women are so often doing the unpaid work, whether it's at home or in the office, and that can actually impact our capacity and our capability in our paid for jobs, and may make us seem as though we're not contributing as much as other people, and building brand and presence. Just in terms of, I thought, Bianca, to build on some of the stats that we've seen that might be useful as part of setting up this piece, is when we talk to women about what's getting in the way in terms of achieving the career outcomes they want, and in terms of being able to really own their value and to step into the positions that they would like to. These are the results we saw in some research we did a couple of years ago. This clarity piece was huge. So when we're unclear about what we're aiming for and what our worth is and how we contribute and what we do that makes a difference, it really undermines our ability to stand confidently, as Meg talked about, and to really own that value in the moments that matter. And women also identified relationships. I don't have the relationships. And this is a really important one we notice all the time. If your primary relationships are only with your leader, if your leader leaves the organisation, you can often feel as though, well, who's my who's my mentor now, who's my advocate, or who's going to speak up for me. So building relationships more broadly is really important. Confidence is, it comes up all the time for us. I don't have the confidence. I don't feel as though I'm resourced or I have the wherewithal to ask for what I want. Compromise, the perception that I will have to give up too much in order to either get that salary rise or that new position. And then this other one about skills and experience, I don't think I've got that. In our experience, while about 19 or 20% of people say that, it's really less than 10%. Nearly everybody we come across, and certainly the people on this call today, and I'm sure in your community, Bianca, you already have all the skills and experience you need for that next role. It's simply a matter of how do you apply that and how do you go about the role. All of these are underpinned by confidence. So, we found that really all roads lead back to, if I don't have this rock solid core confidence in myself, if I don't feel resourced to front up and have those conversations, whether they go well or not so well, I will tend not to do it. And that can be really detrimental, I think, to what's important in terms of achieving those outcomes you'd like to. So what we identified the more we did work with larger organisations and in our public programs is that this confidence gap is actually having a huge impact on people's capability gap. I want to say this a couple of times because people sometimes go, what? How does that work? What's happening is every time we say, oh, not now, or I'm not ready, or I'll wait until, or actually, I'm worried about this. Every time we don't step into the opportunity to own our worth, to apply for that next role, to get that salary negotiation, we end up being a few steps behind. This is that piece I talked about. There is no standing still, because over time, somebody else is putting their hand up. Unfortunately, very often that's a man, and they are saying, yep, I'll give it a go. Even though I've only got, 6 out of 10 of what it takes, I'm going to give it a go. And as they go into these roles and as they do more, they gain more capability. And then when the next round happens, the compounding effect is they actually do have more skill, capability, and experience compared to someone who said, I'm not quite ready, I need a bit more, I need to do this, I need to do that first. So just really want people to appreciate that in our experience, you are already more than ready for the next step. The only thing between you and that is usually your self-belief and that confidence of giving it a go, even if you don't have 10 out of 10 for what's required. So what I wanted to, and Bianca, what you invited me to do today was talk a bit about this compounding effect of the status quo. And I thought I'd share a couple of slides that just kind of show you incrementally over time what happens in terms of how people are remunerated and what that looks like. Because I think when we see the stark gap, that starts to get us to the point of, oh, okay, this is what I'd like to do differently, or this is why I'd be prepared to try something new. So you'll see here, we've got two people. We've got patient Pam is the orange line there, and we've got a ninja negotiator. This is someone, who's prepared to go in and have those conversations, even if they're a bit uncomfortable, even if they feel as though, maybe I won't get what I want, but it's worth asking. And you'll see at the start here, even in the very first rung, what we quite often observe with women going into new roles is they don't negotiate at that point. They actually say, oh, yes, thank you very much. That's lovely. I'll take whatever's being offered. That's wonderful. And yet we know that quite a lot of people, and certainly some of our clients, because this is what we coach them to do, go in and say, yep, I really appreciate that offer. That's great. I'd like this. And they actually start the negotiation in the very first role or interview or next step. So they actually start the dynamic of, I'm going to own my value right here and right now from the outset. And you can see that already has, a difference in terms of their salary. Now, as we go on, you'll see the next rung here is the next time it comes around. And this is, initially they were a grad around about 2021. Now they're 24. So we're getting into maybe a junior management role. We're moving up to the next step. Again, patient Pam is likely to just either take what's offered or maybe ask for a little bit more. But a ninja negotiator will actually go in and say, hey, this is what I've done. This is all that I've contributed, and this is where I'm going to take it next. And they start painting the picture and talking about where they're going to take, what they're going to do next, and what the value to the business will be of their contribution. And you can see now we've got there's a 15. There's a really big difference here in terms of nearly 15,000 more in terms of the range. And this is not just the salary they're taking home, right? This is the superannuation, potentially their investments, all sorts of things are having a ripple effect from this salary conversation. So as we get into our late 20s, the next opportunity comes up, and this could be potentially a mid-management opportunity. And again, we start to see a big difference here. And each time we get the opportunity, if we're good at negotiating, we're resourced, if we know how to own our value and stay in that conversation and take that next step, we're widening the gap. So what we're trying to understand here is the cost of not having the skills to do this, of not being great at owning our value, of not knowing how to negotiate, and when we do. And then you can see here, by the time we're into, early to mid 30s, this is a huge gap now. So it's not that patient Pam hasn't improved and increased. She absolutely has. In fact, you'd say, looking at it at the raw data, she started off at 60, she's at 96. It's not terrible. But when you compare her to a ninja negotiator, she's going to be 40% below. And that has a huge cumulative effect. And I know, Bianca, you have some wonderful financial advisors and fantastic people in this community who'll talk to you about what the impact of that gap is at 30, 35, 40, and what that'll mean at 60, 65, 70. So that's I guess, the painting the opportunity and the cost of owning our value, and why, Bianca, you and I are so passionate about supporting and resourcing women to step into this sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes tricky conversation. And I've got quite a few short stories that we can share over the next little while about that. But I think it's a really good conversation to be in. So I think when we talk about the value of this, getting resourced in whatever way you might do it is the gold here. When we do this, we understand our value. We are able to negotiate much better contracts, much better rates. We're much more clear and concise about our contribution. The more we dig into this, and the more we actually laugh sometimes, Bianca, because it's, I'll tell you the story about Jules, who's on the screen now. So Jules is an incredible marketing lead. In large public organisations is where she's done most of her career to date. And when she was doing some work with us in one of our programs, we knew that her rate was way under market. We said, really, you've been in this role for a while. You are now you started off, you had a team of 3, you're leading a team of 15. Really, you've got to ask for more next time round. In fact, her boss had even said, next time round when we're negotiating this, you need to ask for more. And she was saying, oh, no, but I'm so uncomfortable with those conversations. I don't want to have that conversation. And when I was talking to her, I said, Jules, when you don't ask for what you're worth, not only are you shortchanging yourself, but you're shortchanging every other woman in the system. This is partially why we have a gender pay gap, because we're not out there advocating and role modeling and stepping into our value and asking for it in every moment. And actually, our employers expect us to do this. They actually want us to be able to do this, because if you're good at negotiating here, guess what? You're good at negotiating everywhere. I think, Bianca, we might have talked about this before. When Sheryl Sandberg was going for her job as coup for Facebook, she was in negotiation with Mark Zuckerberg. And he said, oh, I'm really not enjoying this conversation. He really didn't like the negotiation they were in. It was a tough negotiation. She was absolutely owning and advocating for her value. And she said to him, Mark, I know this is a tough conversation, but guess what? From here on in, I will be on your side of the desk negotiating for you and the business. And I think there's something to be held here around how important it is for us as individuals, for us as women, for us in our role models. How can we do more and more of this?
You've got a question, that's a really powerful point, but you've got a question in there from Nicole, who is in the midst of a remuneration review, but her leadership team's dragging their feet on actually completing it, which would mean, Nicole, you're still waiting to find out if you've got that pay rise or not. How long has it been?
Yeah, tell us a little bit more, Nicole, about what's going. If you're okay, if you're in the cone of silence of Bianca's community here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this session. It's really awesome. So at the mid-October point, I approached my direct manager.
Wow.
And I recently have taken on quite a bit more in my role. From being a very state-based role now to a national level with bigger responsibilities and broader responsibilities. And I said, look, I'd like to have a look at this. And I had been putting it off for various reasons. But I summarized my business case in this particular instance. I sent it off, and there's probably about 2 levels that this would have to work through to have a look at if I would be eligible for that particular raise. And where are we now? Mid-February, and I'm still waiting. And I have asked what's going on. I've drawn relevance to the time I put into that conversation, the fact that I've been taking on more. We've had, inflation, pay increases are not keeping up with those prices rising. There's a lot of factors that play into this. And what would your advice be to basically let them know shit or get off the pot? Because I'm sick of waiting.
Well, I'm with you on the ball is to some degree in your court now, Nicole. We are in a tight talent market. I'm not sure of your exact role or business or that sort of thing. And I would have thought it was beholden on organisations who want to keep good staff and to manage them to come back to you. Like, it may not be the answer you want, but at least you've got an answer. And then you've got choices about what you do next. Being in this state of flux, I actually think is really unhelpful, and it's actually unfair. So I think your point about, exactly, there needs to be some point at which you draw a line in the sand around how long you're prepared to be patient. And, we always encourage people to have good intent in these conversations and to be compassionate to their leaders. And, yes, I know you have a lot on and that sort of thing. Yep. And to hold good, firm boundaries around it. So this is a piece about where, so firstly, I would say to them, have you got all the information you need? So you've done your business case, but let's just check. Have you got all the information you need to make the decision? And if there's any review that needs to be done, then okay, so I will get that done by X amount. Okay. Once you've confirmed that they have all they need, I would be saying something like, I appreciate that this is complex and you may need to speak to multiple layers, and I need to get an outcome. We started this conversation in October. We're in February, it's 4 months. I need to know a decision, maybe the decision is not going to be something I'm going to love hearing, but I do need you to make a decision around it, because that will then inform me about what I might need to do next. So can we agree that you will give me a decision by, and I would actually put a date on it?
Okay.
So you start to be driving the conversation and what's going to happen. And obviously that takes a certain degree of, resolve and confidence and composure. And I think what's really important, and I'd advocate here, is we're not doing this from a place of threat or judgment or anything like that. It is simply that if they've got all they need and it's a business decision, we need to get a business outcome, and then everyone can make choices from there. So it's kind of, there's a certain detachment that needs to happen here, because this is a commercial conversation. And when we get
because you can feel awkward about things like that. You can be made to feel awkward about even, can I ask today? Like, so you're saying try to remove that thinking.
Well, the piece here is, we talk a lot about resourcing women to actually be able to stand and hold their equanimity, their composure in the moment, even when it's a difficult conversation. So certainly you're not always going to get what you want straight up, and it may be a two-part piece, but at least you're in the negotiation of the when and how and what, and you're in agreement, so if they say to you, if they come back and Nicole, I've got no idea, but let's make up some numbers, you're asking for 30,000 more because that's the level of, what it is that you're contributing now. And they come back to you and say, hey, Nicole, there's no room to move on that, but we're prepared to do 15. You need to then be very clear about what's your next step. Are you okay with that? But are you going to say, actually, I'll accept 15 for now, but I want to resume this conversation in October this year. And I want to know that there's room for the next part. Because often we find within these negotiation conversations, they don't all happen at once. And very often what we're counselling women to do, and I think, Bianca, we have spoken of this before, is have the conversations early about money. Get a figure on the table, even if it's beyond what your company is likely to do, because what that means is it's actually in there. It's been spoken about. It's part of the system. So next time around, whether it's 6 or 12 months, there's already a data point. There's already a statement of work. There's already all of that. And it's much harder for them to refute what's going on in the iterative conversations, which is why it's so important that we get the agenda up as early as possible. So this all, it can wait till next week, or they're so busy, or next month, or I'm not ready, or I haven't done my business case, or whatever your excuse is. And I'm going to be a little bit harsh and say there are excuses. They are shortchanging you. So, and this is not you, Nicole, because you've already done the hard work and you've done the but for others who potentially are avoiding the conversation, you're just disadvantaging yourself further. And Bianca, picking up on your this, you can be made to feel uncomfortable. Actually, no one can make you feel anything in one sense, in the sense that you choose your response and feelings. Now, when you haven't done a lot of personal and professional development, it can feel as though you're at the effect of other people. But what we know is we are all, particularly as employees, we all have choice. And if you are in a dynamic where you feel you can't speak up about your value, you can't ask for things, there's a couple of things to check in on. Do you need to do some work around your own resourcing and your own strength in order to be able to stay in that conversation? Or are you in an organisation that doesn't actually value people? Are you in an organisation that tries to make it difficult? And I'm not saying that would be the case, but I'm curious about what's going on if you feel as though you are not even allowed, or you're not permitted to have the conversation. Any other thoughts or questions? Nicole, is that been useful? I just want to check in before we.
Yeah, totally. I just wrote a bunch of notes.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic.
No, that's really good. Thank you.
Good. I think I've worked for that company before.
Yeah, we all have, time and time again. I think it doesn't matter where you are or who you were with, it happens. So thank you.
And we're actually quite passionate about supporting women to have the conversations within their existing organisation, because we know that a lot of organisations miss out on female talent progressing. So we and we actually support, we coach the managers and the executives on the other side. So we're quite positive about this, and you need to know when it's time to say enough. You do need to know when that is. And Another story I'll share is someone who came through the program about halfway through last year, and she works in a very male-dominated space, and is very equipped, very talented in her area. Has written articles, known in the industry. A very strong player. And she went through the program. She used our, business case stack in order to articulate her value and to share it. She went back into the organisation. She shared it with them. She showed them. They looked at it and they said, "Yep, actually, we kind of agree. Yep, that's true, and we're not going to pay you that. We're not going to." And so, what she's been beautiful at with this whole process is sharing her journey. So she came back in and in a closed group, said, well, it's really disappointing, and I'm not compromising. This is really important to me. I now know my value. I've done the work on it. I've looked at, all the guides, all of the, salary information. I know that this is what I'm worth. And so over the next 4 months, she just applied. There's not a huge in her industry. It's not like a huge, there wasn't a huge number of people to go to, but she went to other organizations and she just talked about her value, what it was, and that sort of thing. Anyway, in January this year, she was offered the role she wanted at the salary she wanted, and has chosen to move. And so, as I said, we love to see women progress within their organisations, and sometimes, for whatever reason, that can be internal dynamics, it can be resources, it can be salary allocations and levels. There's a whole lot of things. It's not possible. And in that instance, what I love about Jen's story is she was willing to not to blow up, not to, she didn't, when she got the bad news, she didn't have a, hissy fit or sort of, get angry. She just went, okay, now I've got the intel to make a new decision.
Nice. So if anyone else has got another
Fiona.
question, do send it through. And thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Thanks, ladies.
Good luck with that.
Yes, please keep us in the loop how that goes. We'd love to hear how that turns out for you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Cool. So, Bianca, there's a whole lot of places we could go now. Anything in particular that you wanted to ask, or things that we want to touch on?
If anyone has a question in particular that they want fleshed out here that matters to their current situation, please put it in the chat because we can go there with it. What I wanted to really touch on is this. You kind of said it before. This is an opportune time for women, I believe, at the moment with what's going on. If you're ever going to put yourself forward or put your prices up, I feel like now there is more momentum and certainly more support for doing that, and we're seeing that in those employment numbers, the skills shortage, and there's this wonderful, call it a vibe or whatever you want, but there is this front-footedness about it all. So I suppose I wanted to talk about if you're seeing that, and if and how you might use that to your advantage if you talk about skills shortages.
Absolutely. I think, look, as I said, we do a huge amount of work with all sorts of organisations, and financial services and tech are two of the big ones, and they are really tight on people at the moment, and having all sorts of challenges, retaining talent, attracting talent, that sort of thing. So the market, there's never been a better market to own your value and negotiate a better salary package, better conditions, better whatever it is that matters to you. And I'd certainly encourage everybody, whatever your role is, to be speaking up about that and to doing that. And if you're in your own business, what are the ways in which you could put your prices up or increase the value package for your customers, thinking really creatively about, again, that value stack, that business case. How do I articulate and share what it is that's going to matter to the decision makers and the stakeholders? So there's lots of pieces to this that are really important. And I think while it's important to know that it's absolutely a talent market, if you're the talent, you are in demand, it's important not to use that as a threat. And this comes to this negotiating piece, that when you're negotiating, you want to be negotiating on the basis of your value and contribution, what you've done in the past, what you've done over and above in the past, and where you're going to take things in the future. So it's a 3-part value stack that you're looking at there. And when you start talking about, oh, well, the market's really tight, or, my friend got this or that, it detracts away from the dynamic that you're in with your employer. And really what you want to stay focused on is your value, your contribution. Yes, all that's happening, and it's really good data, and it's really important to know, because it resources you to stay really calm and composed, because you know that if this conversation doesn't go all that well, or, for whatever reason you choose to leave, there's plenty of other opportunities. And you can know that without necessarily bringing it into the conversation as such. Now, if your manager does, or if that comes from them, then that's a different thing. They're actually acknowledging some of that. But I think we want to be careful, Bianca, not to be seen as though we're trying to manipulate the situation. I think we want to be really able to stand on our own value and our own worth in these conversations.
Now, ageism, career breaks, how do you navigate that? How do you articulate your worth through, you might be older in the workforce, returning to the workforce. So there's a few critical things that we face as women, roadblocks, you might even say. Is your approach to negotiating your value different when you know you're up against some hurdles there? They might come from employer bias, they might come from other things.
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. We talk about these, whether they're structural, part of the system, which ageism and career breaks can be, or whether they're internal, my self-belief and my willingness to engage in difficult conversations or to feel uncomfortable, that sort of thing. These are all roadblocks and barriers to getting the outcomes that we believe women deserve. I think it was the beginning of 2021. We had a woman in our program who was, she would be in her mid to late 50s, and she had worked for one organisation for 20 years. Really smart woman, Jean, very, very good at her job. And for whatever reason, there was a major restructure at the organisation, and she was made redundant on a reasonably good redundancy package, but she really felt rocked by this whole experience. In fact, her confidence just fell away. So she had been, I think, not necessarily so aware of how much her confidence and identity was tied to her role. And then when it was no longer there, she found it really, really painful. And in a way, the program came at the perfect time, because it sort of supported her to think about things in a different way and to work with a peer group and that group coaching to understand what was going on for her personally, because there are some layers to this that are important. With ageism, yes, absolutely, it's the wrong thing, and it's often more complex than simply that. There's quite often stuff going on internally for me as well as for the organisation, and sort of understanding some of those dynamics. And again, not being fast to judge. And I know this is hard because, when you've tried a few things and you haven't necessarily got the response you want, it's very easy to default to the biases all around my age. I don't think that helps that much in this situation. I think remaining, positive, confident, and continually coming back to that value that you create, that value you contribute, what your experience means, what you can deliver as a result of that. I think that is really where the opportunity lies. And what I can say, again, it wasn't a super fast thing. I think it took 3.5 or 4 months. But where Jean ended up was actually a better role with a better organisation. And she sort of said on reflection, I just didn't think that was possible at the time. I didn't know what was available to me. I didn't know it was possible. And she really credited, in a way, the program and her buddy group and that sort of thing for supporting her to see the world differently and to articulate and share her value across her network. Because having worked in that industry for over 20 years, she was under leveraging her network, which I think, this is something, again, you talk a lot about, Bianca. women are so good at promoting and supporting and advocating for other women. Our network is often one of our biggest professional assets. And so when we are in a situation where we would like some help, we'd like some introductions, or we'd like some support, very often, there's a rich resource in the people we already know who are prepared to speak to people on our behalf or introduce us. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. I think there's definitely some challenges around ageism, and we want to consciously work to dismantle that bias that exists, and we want to resource women to meet the system as it is now. So that's our.
So how do you articulate your worth, regardless of ageism, whatever that barrier might be? How do you articulate your worth? Because in your description, you're talking about with grace. So I'm thinking that you're alluding to not being cocky. That can work for some people, though.
Oh, yes.
So how do you do it? How's the right? Is there a right way?
I think we should be who we are. So if your personality is to be a bit kind of, to have the banter and to kind of get in there and to be very upfront and maybe be a bit controversial, then for you, that might really work. And you might be able to own that and hold that really well. I don't think there's one way here. I think it does depend a bit on you and how you show up. I think arrogance is always going to be a really difficult one because it tends to be off-putting. So if we assume that we, deserve something more, or we're, arrogant around in the way we position ourselves, that is likely to put people off. And that's probably not going to be a great place for negotiation. So when we're talking about this, I'm talking about grace, but I'm talking grace tame kind of grace in terms of strength of character, strength of purpose, strength of knowledge, strength of depth of who I am, what I stand for, and what I'm worth in this moment. So this is not about pussyfooting around or, letting other people have the upper hand in the conversation. This is coming to the conversation as an equal, really clear in my value. And as I said, that comes from a number of different data points. You really want to have that solidly in you so that as you're having the conversation, you don't get wobbly around what it is you contribute.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because men are often viewed a bit different to women when it comes to the negotiation, and you can call it arrogance. Some might. You could call it ego. Maybe it's more ego than arrogance, to be fair. But it works for a lot of men, statistically more so than women. And I've always been conscious as we continue to lift as women, and we strive to build our progress, of coming into our own rather than having to feel like we've got to be like men.
Yeah, and I think there is, you touch on something that's very dear to our hearts. This importance of honouring who we are. Absolutely, there are times when you want to, be assertive and to do things in a certain way. And I think sometimes that, I love Catherine Fox on this, if we get some feedback, you kind of go, you would never say that to a man. You can just lean in and say, would you mind repeating that? Like, just let them catch, because sometimes that bias is so entrenched, they don't even know it. And you say, would you mind repeating that? Or you can even say, do you think you'd say that in the same way to a bloke? Like, just be, and do it not again from a place of judgment, but curiosity. Like, hang on, let's just unpack that a little bit. Sometimes, when we talk about bias, a lot of the time it can be unconscious. So there's this lovely opportunity to spotlight that quite profoundly without having to slam people. And I think that's an opportunity we all have as we seek to, we are really disrupting a lot of old conditioned patterns that have existed for decades. So, it's not surprising that this can feel uncomfortable for us, for the men and women we're advocating for in terms of our value. Everybody is being disrupted by women speaking up and owning their value. It's not something we were taught to do. It's not something we've necessarily been encouraged to do. Certainly maybe younger generations have, but it is it is a very sticky point. And we absolutely say this. I mean, I think, what was it, Bianca, the financial services industry, it's, the gender pay gap is absolutely huge. Yeah, it's like 20%. I think, chartered accountants just did one. It's $50,000 at, mid-career. Like, and as we talk about the exponential compounding effect, these are scary numbers in terms of, and we've got people here, we're talking. So I know a lot of the WGEA data is not, the jobs are not the same. In this particular case, we're talking like for like jobs. So that's where I think there's so much opportunity.
That's a lot of that too, is when you're taking career breaks as well, and the impact of that, and bias absolutely is in there. I wanted to ask, when we look at the New South Wales nurses, for example, one of the top line paragraphs when you're reading about it is that this is the first pay rise negotiated in a decade. How often should you be negotiating a pay rise?
I'm going to say annually. I think,
schedule it in.
Yes. Yeah. It should be part of your performance review. In our opinion, the way we've seen this work well is as part of your performance review. Really, this is all about, the exchange between you and the organisation. Are we in good exchange here? So, whenever you came in, you agreed to a certain salary and you agreed to do a certain amount. Inevitably, you will end up doing much more than that, as Nicole just shared with us. So as you're doing more and you're contributing more value and you're doing more, you don't want to end up out of exchange. And that's the conversation to be having. Let's just make sure. Now, it may be it's only a relatively, some years it may be quite a small increase, but at least you're keeping it live and on the table, and it's part of the conversation. And I'm not talking CPI here. I'm not talking across the board piece at all. I'm talking about you owning your value each and every year, and as you're going up, making sure that you are reminding people of what it is you've contributed. Hey, remember when we did that project and what that meant to the company, and we were able to sell X number more, and that meant, it's really getting into the business impact of your contribution. So the more you can make it, quite tangible like that, it's useful. I think this piece around career breaks is a really interesting one. And we need to be conscious of the cost of career breaks. I'm not saying people should or shouldn't do it. I'm just saying if you're not aware of it, that can be a problem. So understanding that, and also being prepared to not to necessarily let that make a huge difference, because actually, in some industries, a gap can be quite a big gap in terms of capability or experience. But in most industries, we find women catch up pretty damn quickly. They're very motivated. They're very keen to catch up, whatever, might have been lost. So
how possible is it to catch up? Because I'm thinking of your Pam analogy at the start and your ninja negotiator. You had a 40% gap there.
Yeah, look, that gap, you're unlikely to catch up. When it probably depends, Bianca, on when you leave. Well,
can you catch up by that much, please?
Well, and I would encourage people now to think about what have you left on the table before? Okay, what am I going to do now to make sure I ratchet up every opportunity I've got from here? Because you could keep going at that same rate, and it could be much more than that by the time you're 60, 65. Or you could take control of it now, and you could decide, I am never going to miss out on another pay rise between now and the end of my working career. So I think there is that. I think
Emily's got a question on that she's had so many career breaks that her salary hasn't moved much at all.
Yeah.
And so has Karen. Maternity leave.
Yeah.
I can say something to that when I've been in my jobs, it hasn't been for very long. So I'm kind of doing like 6-month contract break.
Emily, are you making excuses for yourself?
Yes, probably. But I guess when I go back to start finding a new job, I kind of I don't have those like achievements under my belt at my last job because I wasn't there for very long. Like, so I don't know if that's given me a bit of a problem. But I'm a sucker for traveling.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that, Emily. Just, I guess it's an appreciation of what, and there are certainly organisations where travel is a big part of what's available. So I think there's a few things. One, I would say, I think it's highly unlikely that you have not contributed huge value in 6 months when you have been in roles and you've done things. So I think part of this is about, rather than thinking of it as, oh, I've had this eclectic career and I've only done this and I've only done that. What did you contribute? What progress was made? What projects happened because you were instrumental? What did you do? And really positioning your value, even if it was a 6-month contract. In fact, in some ways, someone who can come in 6 months and do something really cool is more valuable than someone who lolls about for 12 months. So yeah. I think there's an orientation here around each time you go into one of these 6 months contract. What's my goal here? What am I going to be able to say at the end? What am I going to be able to demonstrate? What am I going to be able to position so that next time I'm negotiating, I'm worth another, whatever it is, another 10, another 15,000. And your intentionality around that will likely drive results, which will lead to more likelihood of getting what you're worth over time.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I've just started another 6-month contract, so that's that'll help me.
Emily, I would like you to spend a little bit of time getting really clear on where you want to be in 6 months' time, painting that picture, talking about it, talking to whoever you report to, talking about whatever the achievements are going to be. Because what I would love for your CV by the end of that is you've got some really good achievement statements to take wherever you go next, or potentially you're asked to do more here.
That role. Thank you.
There's some good apps that are free. Like I know there's some good career apps that'll help you with that. And I know Pep Talk has an app that just allows you to track some wins. It's free.
Yes, I was on that call last time.
Yeah, so it's you could be using that information so that you can plan these progressive continuation of pay talk rises when you feel like it's come up, when you've built up your piggy bank. How many wins do you need to go to that annual pay rise? Is there a formula there?
I don't think there is, but I think you do want to be tracking. So I think anything that, whether it's an app or whether it's your own journaling or however, we actually encourage people in their emails, keep a little folder of all your kind of acknowledgements and emails and anything that you kind of feel is worth celebrating and that sort of thing. So when you go, you've actually got like a store of things that, or you get some good feedback from someone, all of these things are part of that. When I go to say, I did a great job on this and, there was this kind of business outcome, and, Jerry, was one of the people who, recommended me for that because I'm so strong in this particular area or capability. So I think the more that you get comfortable talking about your strengths, your capabilities, your influence, the way you've progressed something, the commercial outcomes, those achievement statements are really important, and they're more than wins, Bianca. They're actually, this is what I contributed, this is the impact, and this is what it meant to the organisation. So they're fairly robust, and people find these painful to write. We occasionally do CV boot camps, and people find it so painful to get to, and they are gold when you can nail those. And once you've done it a few times, it becomes easier. It's like anything. The first few times you do it, it feels a bit uncomfortable.
Can I just add something real quick? It's Nicole again. I'm very chatty today, but it's funny. Two things. I think it was Emily that said that she loves to travel. Look, I think that's actually something for you to incorporate, your broad experience in dealing with different cultures and personalities and navigating those types of things sound like it would be a very beneficial point to make. And it made me think of a time I had to write a biography for a judging process I was going through, and I was up against CEOs and board directors, and I'm thinking, what the hell do I have to contribute? But I made it fun. I talked about how I'm an expert negotiator because I have a 5 and 13-year-old. I am a nurse. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm an expert cubby builder. These types of things that we take for granted in personal lives really do contribute to our skill set, I think.
It's a really
inside.
It's a really good point. I've seen some great posts on that, social posts on that as well, about the value of that care thing. And that's where we're kind of at this point in time with the care value and the role traditionally of women when they take time off work to care, or for whatever break you've got, because we don't value it as highly at home. Any kind of work that's done, even if it's organizing birthday cakes or things in the workplace that is deemed to be not as labor intensive, is seen as an extension of that unpaid. And so we undervalue it if we're undervaluing it there. So I think that's really important. And it brings me to Karen's point, Nicole, that Karen's saying that maternity leave makes her feel, the stop starts, that she can't ask for that pay rise. So what are your thoughts on that? And can you incorporate some of those? How can you incorporate some of those learnings?
I love Nicole's advice around that. And we actually do that as well when we see people's, and for lots of reasons, people have reasons why they were out of the workforce for a certain time, and get creative with it. Yeah, absolutely. What are the ways in which I can position this and I can harvest all the great learning that I did in that? I love Nicole about all the different skills that you gain, and it's absolutely true. As a parent of older children now, I'm enormously grateful for what having children has taught me. So I think there's a lovely piece here about owning all of your experience and expertise. When we do deep dives into people's value, we often get them to surface some of that stuff that is not your traditional work experience, but it actually informs who you are as a person. And it has given you a richness and a depth and a knowledge that is unique to you. And so when you show up at the table, you have all of that at your service as well. So I think it's about a calibration of what we perceive to be worthwhile and valuable and what we don't. And look, we've got lots of stories with maternity leave, some good, some bad. But our overall piece around parental leave has been, on the whole, companies are getting much better about this. We've had quite a lot of people who, in the process of applying for roles, have found out that they're pregnant and have been worried about it. And the organisation said, no worries, fantastic. You're entitled to this leave, blah, blah, blah. They've actually been really well supported right the way through. So we're seeing, I wouldn't say that's universal yet, but absolutely it's changing and it's becoming much better supported. And those, I think what I would encourage couples, if you are in a couple situation, is to think about the ways in which you can both take time to support the care of children and your careers, because that compounding effect is happening far more to women, because in our society, the default is that the woman will do all the caring, particularly when we're talking about children or even aged parents or that sort of thing. So what's the way in which we can both share the care and share the earning and share the compounding effect of those, negotiated salary rises? So it's not about I don't think there's an either or here, but I can just say from my own experience, there was a time when, I was the lead parent, and then at a certain point we swapped and my husband became the lead parent, and so that actually worked for us in terms of, and everyone's got to find their own path with that.
How do you overcome, though, that feeling that you can't ask for a pay rise because you've just come back? I remember distinctly feeling this myself after coming back from one particular employer and working a 4-day week that was really 6 for me, and still not getting the pay rise. That's from Karen. You've got a few more questions in there, but that was...
Yeah. Look, I think, it's unlikely that, the first couple of weeks you come back after you've been on extended leave for whatever reason, that you're going to have a salary negotiation conversation. I think even just in yourself, to be more settled in your environment, to know a bit more about the dynamics, which might have shifted a bit since you were there last time, to just understand that is important. I then think you need to look at the arc. And if you've been with this company for some time and maybe you've taken a couple of periods of extended leave, you need to look at the whole arc of what it is you've contributed and how you've grown in the role and what your level of responsibility is now. And if you can look at that and you can say, actually, I'm contributing hugely more than I was back here, and I'm doing this in this way and you can articulate that really well and you can own that value and own that worth in yourself, then absolutely that's an appropriate thing to have that conversation about salary. Because just because you haven't been there for a few months or however long it was doesn't negate your impact, your influence and contribution. And again, you need to be able to stand in this. So there is, this is such a curly one, Bianca, and I know you and I talked about this before. I really, it feels unfair to me that women are put in this position where it's almost like we should be grateful for the crumbs. We should be grateful for, flexibility. Well, flexibility is a fact of life now, COVID, the world and everything. Everyone's got flex. So flex is just how we do things now. So that's not a benefit as such. It's that people being remunerated and rewarded for their contribution and that we're in good exchange with whoever is our boss or whoever the organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's what I was offered instead, was flexibility, and I'm guessing a lot of people this group may have too. We have just hit 1 o'clock. If anyone wants to come off and just ask a question, please do. Otherwise we will start to wrap it up, but you can speak to Fiona. She is at Core Confidence. They do amazing stuff there, and but she also contributes every now and again. I'm picking her brain for articles for Financy at the same time. But I really hope that this group has found something from this session, and I know I have, that will help you in taking a step forward. And I think that's the biggest thing. If today does anything, it's just that little action of confidence, of stepping forward, that I really hope you get from these sessions to support your progress.
Thank you so much for having me, Bianca. It's just been awesome to share with your community. Thank you for your questions, interactions, posts in the chat feed. Really, really appreciate it. Wonderful to meet you all. If you would like any more intel or you'd like anything that I've mentioned in the call, please get in touch. I've just popped my email address in the chat feed, fiona@quantumimpact.com.au. And I look forward to our next session, Bianca, whenever that's going to be, probably in a couple of months' time.
Yep, absolutely. All right. See you, everybody. Talk soon.
See you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.